Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I am unfortunately driving for an hour, let me adjust the angle on this thing, to go to the Apple Store because I am returning my Apple Vision Pro. I have the misfortune of living a pretty long ways away from the nearest Apple Store, so it takes a while, so it's a commitment. Several other people have talked about this. Robert Scoble is keeping his, Farzad is returning his. I've heard a lot of people bouncing back and forth. This was basically the only day that I could really manage to get there. It's a busy week. So anyway, driving in the evening, it's 6 o'clock in the evening, and I'll get to the Apple Store about 7 and return it and get back anyway, blah, blah, blah. So the big question is why? And there was a lot of back and forth about it. And really, ultimately, I believe that the non-shareability came down to be the most important factor in my mind. So, my son wanted to try it. I was able to let him try it, but I had to remove my prescription lenses from inside, but whatever, that's my problem because I have to wear glasses. And it works, but it's in guest mode, and there's no way to save that guest mode. Sort of like in a Tesla where I have like my profile and then my wife's profile and my child's profile, and you get in the car and it goes to that profile. So it would be lovely, especially if you could use the Optic ID and have it memorize multiple people's profiles, that it would just see your eyes and go like, oh, it's you, and figure that stuff out and adjust itself based on that. So that's number one. Number two, while my son's head is the same size as mine, so we're both mediums, and he can do the 23W, which is the size faceplate that I have for mine. And by the way, my Tesla is driving me to the Mall of Georgia, of course. So anyway, but while his and my heads are similar enough in size that we can wear the same size head strap and faceplate, my wife's is not that way. And she has a pretty significant prescription, so that she has to wear that as well. So all told, it's $100 for a new strap because you have to get a smaller strap, and it's $200 for the new face mask part, and then it's another $150, so $450 after tax, another $500 to outfit the thing for her, which is basically the cost of something like a MetaQuest 3 or whatever. So that, but again, I'm not necessarily comparing them, but so, you're looking at a lot of money because already, and I'm not going to get a refund for the Zeiss lenses, of course, because those were prescription and they were cut for me, but for the rest of it, I'm looking at getting, it's about a $4,000 nut to chew on. So it's not nothing by any means, and sorry about the sunlight here. It's, so, that it's a lot of money for something that you can't share, and it's not easily transferable between people, and there is a guest mode, I know, but the guest mode is only so useful because of the fact that it's a pain in the butt to change it around, and every time the person stops using it as a guest, there's no way to save that information. So it just goes right back to what it was originally, which is great for me, but doesn't help anybody else. So that would be the number one thing. The good parts about it, of course, media consumption is fantastic. I watched the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, I could see how bad the broadcast was actually on Paramount Plus because it was all chunky and stuff, and it was blown up so big that I could see every little pixel that wasn't there. But it was very exciting. The audio is fantastic. It's amazing that it's that good considering it's not in ear. I found it quite remarkable that it was that good. So media consumption, 3D animation, 3D movies, or animated movies, whatever. So those things are great. 2D movies are great. It's got a lot of that stuff. I did not find it as useful for productivity as other people said. Now, something like the jig thing that you could actually look around and pick apart different engines and whatnot was really interesting as a sort of a pathfinder. It's like, okay, so this is what things could look like in the future, and they could be Jig Space. That was the name. I was trying to remember it. But anyway, it's like this is what it could look like in the future, and it could be really, really useful. But currently, it doesn't have the multi-person collaboration capability in there, which means that when Scott, who also has a Vision Pro, and he's considering whether or not to return it or keep it. But anyway, when it would be great if I could just place that thing down and he could be looking through his headset while we're collaborating, and see the same thing that I am, and we could both draw on it, we could both pull a piece apart, we could look at it. It's going to need more redesign tools, things like that you can actually manipulate things and actually change them around. It is, to some extent, now, coming from, speaking of 3D animation, coming from that background, the thing that I've always said that made it so it makes it really difficult for students to interact with and learn how to do 3D animation programs is the fact that they have to interpret 2D shadows of the 3D and understand it. And so usually what Maya does, and what most other programs based on Maya do, is they use what's called a 4-view, which is that you get an orthogonal top, an orthogonal front, an orthogonal side, and then they have a perspective view in the fourth window, so you can spin it around and tumble it and stuff. But there's a lot of mental gymnastics now after 30 years of using this stuff. It's fine for me, but every time the students learn this thing, it's like, and there's a couple of weeks and of learning that sort of interface thing and understanding how it all works, and it's just something that they have to learn every single time. Now, a pair of glasses like this that was affordable to the masses would be an absolutely fantastic interface, and you would be able to, if you could get stereoscopic view, and Maya does support that. I don't know if Blender does or not, but in Maya, if you have VR headsets, you can actually get a 3D view, and I've used it before, but it's never been terribly good. But I think with the Vision Pro, using it, and that's something I probably should have done. It's like, boop, didn't think about it during the couple of weeks I had it. But I could have set up my Maya, instance on my computer, and I could have checked it out, and it probably would have been really, really cool to have that full 3D interface. It wouldn't be as useful as it needs to be, because that would be on the computer. What you need to do is place it fully on the Vision Pro, so that as you're using your hands, you're literally manipulating the object with your hands. So the fact that you'd have to use a mouse and keyboard at present would limit the usefulness of it, but it would be a pretty cool interface, and that's definitely a way that things could improve in the future, and that would be cool productivity. People have used it for writing and such. I don't know. I tried with the Bluetooth keyboard, and it was okay, and I really liked the immersive environments and the fact that you can tune out the world, but then inevitably it just made people feel like I was ignoring them, because I tended to work at home and stuff. I didn't go to a coffee shop, where I guess it would have been a little bit more acceptable for me to be completely tuned out. But it was, it was kind of isolating and made me feel awkward, and that also comes back to the fact that non-shareability made me feel selfish when I used it. So there was like a feeling, I guess probably a feeling of guilt just because of the expense of the thing, but also, and I know it's a business expense for me, so it's like, it's okay, but I think that still I was feeling a sense of guilt because of how pricey this thing was, but also a sense of guilt in, like, every time I wanted to use it, I had to kind of run through a checklist in my head. It's like, are my wife or kid going to be asking about me? Is there anybody else who's going to want my attention during this period of time? And, I watched the Super Bowl with my wife, and so I did have the headset on most of the game, but we were sitting next to each other, and she was watching it on TV, but the time didn't sync up right, so I was actually ahead of her by like 30 seconds or something. So it was very annoying, because I would be like, yeah, great play or something, and she's like, what's going on? So it was that sort of asynchronousness. So all of this stuff is going to be solvable in the future, right? They're going to be able to get this to be more collaborative. They're going to be able to reduce the price of this. I think that the screens on the front, not the cameras. The cameras are great. The screens on the front, no. Just leave it black like this. I've got my sunglasses on. People can't really see my eyes through my sunglasses, and I made a joke about that. I posted that on X a little while ago. I said this is like the 5th generation Vision Pro, and I think it's gonna reduce to something more like that. But you can just get away with more or less a sunglasses look. You don't have to actually have like all those lenses. They cost a lot of money. I don't think they're very effective. They really don't work that well in person, and so that was kind of a boondoggle. So that would be, if they don't trash that for Gen 2, unless they can come up with something that is way, way better, and it really is improved and works much better than what supposedly did. Navigation problem right here. Every single time I drive and I go down this way, the navigation doesn't go to the right. So it's weird, because the full self-driving is so perfect, but it fails at navigation an awful lot of times. Anyway, but back to the Vision Pro, I think that they need to scrap that unless they can make the Gen 2 significantly better. But the fact of the matter is, they could probably save between $500 and $1,000, maybe not $1,000, maybe call it $500, $750 off the retail price of the Vision Pro simply by getting rid of those lenses. All that stuff is expensive to actually do all of that, and to have the technology to have all of it working and blah blah blah. So I would say just make it look more like ski goggles, right? Ski goggles is very acceptable for people to wear, like shiny lens ski goggles that people can't see through. So I think that's one place they can definitely improve things in the next version. The software is going to evolve over time, right? It's going to be like, it'll get better, it'll get better, it'll get better in an iterative fashion. So that's something I would expect. Vision Pro OS 1.1 will come out in a couple of months, and then 1.2 and whatever. So that will improve, and I think a lot of the apps are going to improve as well, assuming that there is a big enough market still. See, it's really interesting because I think a lot of people bought it. And I think a lot of people right now are considering very heavily. They're at 12 days or 11 days right now out of 14. And they're like, am I going to keep it? Am I going to return it? So I have this feeling that Apple is going to get a lot of returns, and that actually factors in. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But I think that if they have a big enough ecosystem, and Apple's probably going to be relatively close-lipped about exactly how many people ended up buying it and keeping it, unless the number is a blowout number, in which case they'll crow about it. And that would be great. I would actually hope that happens, because I really want this ecosystem to evolve, and I want the next generation to be great. I liken this to the original iPhone. The original iPhone was not fantastic, but I've talked about this previously. My son and I camped out the night before at the, what was it called? Orange, I think, that got taken over by AT&T. But anyway, new AT&T store in 2007, summer 2007 or 2008, one of those two. But anyway, we camped out, we got it. And I was kind of halfway debating between like just selling it, because I figured I could probably flip them and make some money, versus just holding on to it. But once I had actually used one, we ended up selling one, and we didn't end up making that much money. So whatever. But that was how I got involved in this, was I got two of them, kept one. And the one that I kept, I was like, okay, this is by no means perfect, but it is super cool. And there is a functionality and a usefulness to it now that I think are extremely valuable. And so that got me very excited about it. But it was really not until generation 3, it was the iPhone 3G, that was the one that was really useful. And if I'm remembering correctly, and I could have my years off by 1 year or something like that, but I believe that was also the year the App Store came out. And so, to its credit, the Vision Pro has an App Store already, but it's pretty small. But anyway, I could see the progression of the technology. With the Vision Pro, I can see the progression of the technology. I would feel really bad about returning it, except that, Apple is a behemoth, so they'll survive. They're not going to die because I returned my Vision Pro. And of course, they will make some money back on it also as well, which brings me to the last sort of point, which is, I was like, okay, to keep it, not to keep it, there's all of this stuff. I find it really fascinating, super cool, the technology, really cool to be on the bleeding edge. I think it's great, but also not as useful as I was hoping it would be, and a little kludgy in some places. The pass-through is not that great, didn't really talk about that. So anyway, thing after thing after thing. There was problems, there was great stuff. But in the end, what really, really got me was, I was like, wait a second, I can return this thing, and then a lot of people are going to return this thing. And what will happen is, in the next couple of weeks, Apple is going to re-release these out as refurbished units, which means that they'll have barely been used for like 2 weeks, and they'll be fine, and they'll have perfectly good specs and everything. And so if I want to purchase it again, I could probably get a refurbished unit, maybe even get my unit back, and it'll be like $500 cheaper or something like that than what the original cost of it was, because they will resell these things, of course. So that was the final nail in the coffin for Apple. And if you're considering it, I was like, you can basically buy it, and then you can return it, and then you can wait for the refurbs, because there's going to be a lot of them, because a lot of people are going to return these things, and then you can purchase it again for some cost savings. Now, Apple may hold on to these. Maybe they're going to be like, no, we're not going to let you have it in the next couple of weeks. We'll make you wait until April or May or something like that before we start releasing refurbished units, but it's okay. I don't think I'm going to miss it terribly. I will once in a while go like, wow, I really wish I had it, but I'm not going to miss it terribly, and I think I'll be okay for the next few months. The likelihood is that I will purchase the Generation 2 when it comes out, especially if they manage to make it a little bit cheaper, and even more so if there's like an Apple Vision vanilla, not Pro, that removes some of the super duper features but keeps the really cool stuff, and hopefully keeps the Zeiss lens optical inserts the same. That would be a bummer if they don't do that, but assuming that they keep those, I'll be able to just slot those right in and be able to use the Zeiss lenses as a drop-in replacement. And so I think that that will be a moment when I'll be able to feel comfortable with it, especially if it's cheaper. So anyway, we'll see what happens. I think that what Apple's got is a really cool, amazing vision of the future, and I hope it's very successful. But my fear is that too many people are going to return it, and it's not going to be quite big enough. But if anybody is large enough, like Apple, they can soak it up. They spent approximately, from what I hear, $10 billion creating this thing. So what's another couple $1 billion to them making a next generation and kind of forcing it down everybody's throat? I think what we'll see is, maybe in 6 months they'll release an Apple Vision. I don't know. Maybe they'll wait till the Gen 2 to release an Apple Vision till things are cheaper. They've scaled up their manufacturing, and so they can make the lens, the screens and all that stuff less expensively because they've manufactured more. We'll see what happens. But there's a long tail to this, and I think that by Gen 3, we're going to really be talking. It'll probably be pretty excellent, and it will be lighter. It won't hurt as much. I was able to get that to work okay over time, but it still is not ideal. It's not as light as it needs to be. So anyway, all of this stuff I think will get worked out over the next couple generations, and Apple is a behemoth of a company, so it will be able to continue to iterate on this and not I don't think they're gonna make money on this in the first generation, because I think too many people are gonna do like I'm doing and return it. But I think over time it will become a new platform, and that's all to the good, because I think it's gonna be really fantastic. I can't wait to see what the interface looks like in a couple of generations. Right now it's just like screens, so it's like a 2D interface in a 3D world, but I think eventually it's going to be sort of 3D objects that you interact with rather than these 2D screens that you're interacting with, and that's going to be much cooler and much more interesting. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Anyway, I blabbed on. I don't know, 30 minutes away now, so I'm making some progress, and I think we'll see what transpires. And if I really feel like sad that I don't have it anymore, then the cool part is that I can always get another one. So no big deal. It looks like it's not going to be sold out for any length of time. I think it'll be okay. So alrighty, folks, let me know in the comments what you think, especially if you have one. I would be really interested, or either if you do or you don't have one, let me know in the comments whether you think a Gen 2 is going to be the one, or whether Apple's going to release an Apple Vision, not an Apple Vision Pro that will be a little more stripped down, more like $1,000 or something. Again, if the price of this thing, like if this was a tenth the price, so say $400, absolutely no-brainer, would have kept it. Fantastic, but it wouldn't be that. But the interesting question is, if it was half the price, if it was $2,000 rather than $4,000, what would I have said in that case? I probably would have kept it. So I think we're right into that realm of it's too expensive with too little utility yet. But anyway, I would be very interested to know what you all think about that. I'm fascinated to know, especially from people who bought it, but also people who haven't, and are like, yeah, I'm going to wait for Gen 2, or I'm going to wait for Gen 3, or I'm going to wait for whatever generation it is when it's $1,500 or $1,000 or something along those lines. So anyway, let me know what you think, and yep, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.